A millionaire man has all the poor people thrown out from near his building, but when he sees the woman's face, he starts to cry. The cold night air was hurting her skin, the kind of cold that gets under your clothes and feels like it bites your bones. The wind came straight through, racing between the tall buildings, those clean buildings, with white light in the windows and a doorman in a suit at the entrance. But right there in the middle of them, there was a strip of concrete where luxury did not come in. A narrow alley. The ground was wet. It was not just rain. It was dirty water, mixed with food scraps, with oil, with things nobody wants to think about. The streetlight flickered, weak, and made everything look worse. The shine of the rubbish, the black puddles, the soggy cardboard stuck to the ground. Cardboard boxes open, crushed, torn. Some had supermarket writing on them. Others had home appliance brands. Everything was wet, soft, stinking. The smell was strong, sour. A smell that seemed to stick in your nose and never leave. And in the middle of all that, rough voices. "And you, come on, get up, get out of here." Heavy footsteps. Boots hitting the concrete, making an echo. One of the security guards held a torch and aimed it straight at faces. The light cut the dark like a knife. Every time the light stopped on someone, the person shrank back, like that brightness burned. Another guard shoved with his arm, not looking anyone in the eyes. A short, hard shove, like moving a sack out of the way. "This isn't a place to sleep, clear off. Your stink is already getting into the building," he kept saying with no patience. Some of the homeless people gathered the little they had. A thin blanket, a bag, an empty bottle. They moved fast, scared of losing what was left. Nobody argued much. If you argued, life hit you later. An old man tried to grab a box that was his. The guard kicked it to the side. The box scraped through the dirty water and opened. A piece of hard bread fell out, wet, like a stone. The old man stared at it like it was treasure. And there, more pressed against the wall, almost hidden in a corner where the light did not reach properly, she was there. She was not just a woman. She looked like someone the world had forgotten. Thin, very thin. Her shoulders were hunched, like she was trying to make herself smaller. Her hair stuck to her face, dirty and heavy, with strands glued together with oil and rain. Her skin, where you could see it, showed the cold, pale with red patches, like her body was fighting not to go out. She was shaking, not for show, real shaking. The kind that makes your teeth chatter and makes your fingers go weak. But even shaking, she would not let go of what was on her lap. A baby, very small, wrapped in a thin cloth, the kind that used to be light, but now was grey with dirt. The ends of the cloth were damp, and she held that baby like it was the only thing keeping her alive. Her eyes did not go to the guards, not to the floor, not to anything, only to the baby. And there was one detail that stood out even in all the filth. A little wool bootie, tiny, for a newborn. It was white, or it had been white once. Now it was grubby, with one side dark, stained with grease. The wool was covered in little bobbles, like it had been rubbed 1,000 times. And that bootie was hanging on her finger, held by a snapped thread. She moved that finger now and then, like she was checking the bootie was still there. Like it was a lucky charm, a sign the baby was real, that she still had a job to do. The guards came closer. One of them pulled a face of disgust, like the smell was her fault. "Hey, you as well, come on!" He pointed the torch and the light hit her face. The light showed what the dark hid. Her lips were cracked. The tip of her nose was red. A small cut near her eyebrow. And her hands looked like they had been digging through bins all day. Broken nails, marked fingers, shaking. She did not answer. She did not beg. She did not plead. She just pulled the baby tighter into her chest, like a wounded lioness that still has teeth. The guard took a step. He reached out his hand, not for the baby, but for the big box beside her. The biggest box in the corner. A box that was half closed, covered with a bit of black plastic. It looked like her roof, her last bit of protection. "Come on, get up. Take your stuff and go," he said, already grabbing the side of the cardboard. She lifted her eyes, quick. Her eyes had no shine of hope, no easy tears. They had anger mixed with fear, the look of someone who has been pushed too many times. "No!" It came out low, almost with no voice. The word sounded like a plea and a threat at the same time. The guard pulled harder. The cardboard tore with an ugly loud sound, like the alley was screaming too. In that moment she squeezed the baby even tighter, almost crushing it, so scared of losing it. The guard gave a little laugh. "What then? You think this is a shelter?" he muttered. He lifted the big box off the ground. Dirty water ran off the bottom, dripping, and then the sound came. First a tiny whimper, then crying, a baby's cry, a cry echoing in the alley, bouncing off the concrete walls, rising up to the tops of the buildings like it was begging for help from anyone sleeping up there warm inside. The guard froze. The torch shook in his hand. "What the—" he murmured, his voice failing. The woman's eyes went wide. Her face changed at once. It was not mild surprise. It was pure terror. She threw herself forwards, trying to reach the box. "No, don't touch it!" she shouted, now with force, her voice breaking. The baby in her arms started crying more, like it felt her panic. Desperate crying, loud, pulled from deep inside. And there it was, a mess of crying in the alley, like the cold had woken up everything that was alive. The guards looked at each other. The one holding the box swallowed hard. He dropped the box to the ground awkwardly, and the cardboard hit with a hollow thud, and the crying carried on. Sharp and cutting. The sound hit the concrete, came back and seemed to get louder. One of the security guards rubbed the back of his neck, not knowing what to do. The other took a step back like he was scared. The woman pressed up against the wall, held the little one with one arm and reached out the other, desperate, her hand shaking. "Don't touch, please, don't touch," she kept saying, her voice breaking, rough from cold and hunger. The torch shook as it pointed at the box, and the light showed the ripped cardboard wet with the edges giving way. The black plastic that had fallen to the side stuck to the puddle, and then the sound in the alley changed. Before it was just wind, crying and shouting. Now an engine came in, a deep, smooth, steady rumble, the kind of engine that doesn't fail. The sound came from outside the alley, near the main road, and for a second the wind almost seemed to calm down, like it was making space. The security guards turned their heads at once. The black car appeared slowly, coming into the tight space like it ruled even the concrete. Low headlights, clean white light. The shine from the car made the puddles look like dirty mirrors. The car stopped. The engine stayed on for a moment, vibrating in the air, forcing its presence. The back door opened without hurry, and he got out. First the shoe showed, shiny leather, not a mark on it, then the neat trousers. The movement was controlled, like even the way he stepped had been planned. He came fully into the light. Tall, straight posture, broad shoulders, a perfect suit, like he had just walked out of a warm, clean room. The dark fabric looked like it did not belong in that place. It was almost insulting in the middle of the rubbish. On his wrist, a pricey, heavy watch. Need to shine. It just was, and that already said everything. When he took the first step, his smell arrived before he did. A woody perfume. Strong, dry. A smell of wood and good smoke. A smell that cut through the stink of the alley like scissors. The security guards stood up straight at once. Their posture changed, the tone of their voices too. One of them took a quick step forward and lowered his head. "Sir." He didn't really look at them. His eyes swept over the alley like he was looking at something that should not be there. His mouth was tight, his jaw set, his eyes cold. He spoke without shouting, but his voice came out heavy, deep, the kind of voice that makes grown-ups go quiet. "I said I wanted order." He breathed through his nose, looking at the boxes, the bags, the people. "Move them out of here, but without violence, without rudeness, and I said to help them." The last word came out with disgust, not disgust at the people, disgust at the mess, disgust at losing control. One guard tried to explain, nervous, "We're just getting them out, sir. It's just that—" He raised his hand once, just once, and that was it. The guard shut up straight away. The wind blew harder, and his suit didn't even crease. It didn't even look like he felt cold. But inside he had that old anger of someone who thinks everything should work his way. Then the crying cut through everything. His face locked up. It wasn't a normal surprise. It was like his body remembered something before his mind did. He stood still, with one foot a little in front of the other, and his eyes went straight to the dark corner, the torch pointing, the wet box on the ground. The woman curled up, shielding a baby. For a second he couldn't breathe properly. The smell of the alley hit him, the sound of the wind, the crying, and that corner, it felt like it was pulling him in. The guards noticed and got tense. Like deep down, they knew something was wrong there. He started to walk, slowly, not in a hurry, but each step made the alley feel smaller. His expensive shoe stepped into dirty water without hesitation. The sound of leather hitting wet concrete was dry, steady. The woman saw him coming and curled up even more, pure instinct. Her eyes followed the suit, the umbrella a guard tried to offer, and he didn't even take. She pressed the baby tight against her chest. "No," she whispered, like every person in power was the same. The baby in her arms sobbed, his face red from the cold. He stopped a few steps from the corner. His eyes went down. First he saw the torn cardboard, then he saw the black plastic stuck to the puddle, then he saw her shaking hand. And then, even before he really saw her face, he saw something that made no sense in that place. A bracelet, silver, broken. The chain was snapped, hanging, with a bent clasp. The silver was dirty, darkened, but it was still silver. It still had that small pattern he knew better than he wanted to admit. That bracelet wasn't just any bracelet. He was the one who put it on her wrist. At the altar, on the day his hand was warm and steady, and her hand was shaking with emotion, not with cold. On the day she smiled at him with trust. The memory hit like a punch. His chest tightened out of nowhere like his heart had tripped. His fingers moved in the air without him noticing, like they wanted to touch it to make sure it wasn't madness. He swallowed hard. He stepped one step closer, and then he saw her face. Dirty, marked, tired, but it was her. His world suddenly became small and silent, like the car engine had turned off, like the wind had stopped. There was only that corner and that woman. His eyes dropped to her eyes, looking for recognition, a spark, anything. But her eyes were empty. She looked at him like he was just another big man in nice clothes, ready to take the little she had. She held the baby tighter to her chest and showed her teeth in a defensive, almost animal way. "Stay back," she said, her voice low and broken. "Don't touch me." And he stood there with the smell of his perfume mixed with rubbish, looking at the woman who once was everything. She did not blink. Her whole body was a wall between him and the baby, like the whole world was a danger, and she was the last wall still standing. The baby in her arms cried in a broken, shaky way, like even the crying was tired. His little face was red, wet from tears and wind. His tiny nose was running. The ends of his lips were purple. A small sound, but it hurt your ears, because it was not just hunger. It was far too cold. She hugged the baby tighter and growled, low, like someone warning before they bite. "No, don't touch him." Her voice came out rough. It was not rudeness. It was instinct. It was survival. He stayed still for a second. His eyes dropped to the baby almost without meaning to, and there in that squashed, shaking little face he saw it. The eyes, even in the dark, even with tears, even with the baby moving in the thin cloth. The eyes were the same as his, the same color, the same shape, the same way of looking a bit sideways, like he did not trust the world. His chest tightened hard in a way that did not fit him. It did not fit the man with the perfect suit, the expensive watch, the black car. His throat went tight. Mine. The word did not come out, but it hit inside him like a shout. His body reacted before his head did. His instinct rose like fire. It was not a pretty thought. It was simple. It was raw. Protect. Now. He brought his hand to his own coat. She saw the move and stepped back at once. She pulled the baby away, pressing her back to the damp wall. Her look turned even wilder, harder, more desperate. "Stay away." She spat the words, shaking. "I don't need you." He stopped with his coat half open, not finishing the move, not to obey, just to not frighten her more. He looked at her carefully, not with pity, with the care of someone who is scared of doing the wrong thing, and he truly understood. She did not remember. She was looking at him like he was just any stranger, a who turns up from nowhere and thinks he is in charge. But inside, he knew every part of her. The way she held the baby, the way she used her body like a shield, even the way she breathed short like she could not waste air. The baby cried louder, his little body shaking inside the thin cloth, a fast shake, out of control. He took a deep breath. He tried to speak in the lowest voice he could, steady, unhurried, like someone talking to a hurt animal that might attack, but only wants to live. "I'm not going to take him from you." She did not relax, not even a little. He went on slowly, like each word was a hand held out. "I just want him to stop shaking." She bit her own lip and it was already cracked. A tiny dot of blood came out and she did not even notice. Her eyes burned, but no tear fell. There was no room for that. She pressed the baby to her chest and rocked him a bit, trying to warm him with her own body, but her body was cold too. She was using the last of her strength. He took one small step forwards, just one. Then he stopped. He spoke even more quietly. "If I wanted to hurt you, I would have done it already." Her eyes went wide like that sentence was dangerous, but he did not say it as a threat. He said it as a hard truth. He tipped his chin lightly towards the guards behind him. "I can tell everyone to clear off right now." His voice cracked a tiny bit, almost not there. "But I don't want that. I want to protect." She let out a short laugh with no humor, a dry sound. "Protect," she repeated, like the word was a lie. He swallowed. His jaw moved, stiff. Then he said what had been stuck inside him for a long time. It came out a bit wrong, a bit fast, because guilt pushed it out. "You don't remember me now, but it will make sense, I swear." He breathed, the air coming out warm into the cold night. "I looked for you for months." She stayed still. Her face changed a little, like her mind was trying to fit that somewheres and could not. The baby cried again, weaker, like he was getting tired of crying. He saw it and felt a rush he could not explain, like time was running out in that 1 second. He lifted both hands slowly, hands open, empty. No weapon, no threat, just skin. He looked straight into her eyes. He did not look away. "You can hate me later." His voice turned deeper, firmer. "You can swear at me, hit me, call me whatever you like." Pause. He pointed lightly towards the baby without touching. "But let me save him now." The wind hit harder and made the baby's cloth shake. It made her hair stick to her face even more. It made the guard's torch flicker in his hand. She looked at his open hand. Then she looked at the baby. Then she looked at his coat. Thick, dry, expensive, still warm from his body. And she stood there, split between two things fighting inside her, fear and instinct. Fear said, "Don't trust him." Instinct said, "The baby is going to pass out." Her fingers were shaking so much she could barely hold the cloth. She closed her eyes for a second, like it hurt to choose. When she opened them, her voice came out small, broken. If you try..." He cut in, quick and firm, without raising his voice. "I won't." Just like that. He took his coat off fully. The move was quick, because the cold was the enemy. He laid the coat over the baby first and over her arms, like someone covering her that was nearly going out. She curled in, but she did not run. The heavy cloth fell, and for a moment, the baby stopped crying. Just from feeling one more layer of protection, he used that moment. He knelt on the wet ground, not caring about his expensive trousers. His knee went into dirty water, and he did not even blink. His world had become something else. He moved closer to the baby, slowly. She pulled the baby back by reflex. "No!" Her voice rose, desperate. "No!" He did not step back, but he did not rush forwards either. He went gently, like each inch needed permission. "I'm only going to hold him just for a bit. Skin to skin. He needs warmth." She was shaking for real. The baby was too. And in that shaking, she was losing. She let out a small sound, like it was shame to need help. But her instinct won. She allowed it, not because she trusted him, but because she trusted her baby's desperation. He took the baby into his arms. The touch was like a shock. The little body was far too light, warm and cold at the same time. The boy moved, and his tiny hand grabbed the man's shirt under the suit, gripping hard like he did not want to fall. He pressed the baby to his own chest, under his open shirt, to give him direct heat, skin to skin. The baby let out a long, tired sigh, and the cry became only a low grumble, almost a moan. The small body stopped shaking so much. She saw that and lost it at once, because her mind could not separate help from theft. She tried to pull the baby back, hands shaking, eyes bright with anger and panic. "Give him back," she shouted, her voice breaking. He held on firmly, but without hurting him. His hold was safe, like his arm was a wall. He looked at her with the same weight in his voice, that voice that did not shake. "I'm going to protect him." She stood there, breathing hard, staring at that man in a suit, kneeling in rubbish with the baby pressed to his chest. And even so, even seeing the baby calm down, she kept looking like she did not recognize anything, like his face meant nothing to her. The baby was quiet now, but it wasn't peace. It was that thin, shaky silence you get when someone has only stopped crying because they have finally felt warm. The tiny little body still gave a few small shakes, as if the cold was leaving slowly, not wanting to go. He stayed on his knees for a moment longer, holding the baby tight against his chest, like he was scared that if he moved away, the cold would come back hard. The woman stared at the two of them. Her eyes went from the baby to his face, from his face to the alley, to the security men, to the shadows. Her breathing was short, the kind of breathing of someone who has been hit by life a lot and has learned never to relax. She looked ready to run, but there was nowhere to run to. He stood up slowly, carefully so the baby wouldn't be jostled. His suit had a mark of dirty water on the knee. His shoe was wet. He didn't seem to notice. The only real thing there was the weight of that baby and the look of that woman stuck on him like a knife. One of the security men tried to come closer, a bit awkward, like he wanted to help. He didn't even turn his head. He just spoke, quiet, and the order came out heavy. "No one touches." The guard stopped straight away, swallowed hard and stepped back. "No," she said in a thin, desperate voice. She didn't finish, because she didn't know how to explain. She only knew she needed to. He followed her movement with his eyes, and his chest tightened again, because she was broken inside, and he could feel it without her saying a word. He pulled his coat more over the baby and made a short nod. "Don't shake him, please," she whispered, and her voice shook as much as her hands. He stayed beside her steady, like a wall walking. One step from him, one step from her. The baby made a tiny sound, a warm little grumble, feeling his strong heartbeat. The walk to the car felt long even though it was close. The wind hit harder as they left the alley, as if it didn't want anyone to go. The streetlight was brighter, colder, and the black car was there, waiting, big, ready, with the door open like a posh mouth. The driver was already out and holding the door, not saying a word, looking straight ahead, professional. But his eyes had a hidden shock in them. When she saw the car, she froze. Her body went stiff. She looked at the shiny leather inside, at the air that didn't smell of rubbish, at the clean carpet. She didn't belong there, not in her own mind. She wrapped her arms around herself, shaking, and took a step back. "No," she murmured. "I'm not getting in that." He didn't argue. He didn't try to talk her round with pretty words. He just brought the baby a little closer to her face, like showing the simplest truth in the world. The baby opened his eyes for a second, looking lost, then closed them again, resting his forehead on his chest. She looked at that and her face fell apart a little, not from love, from tiredness. She was tired of fighting on her own. He spoke quietly, firm, with no forced sweetness, just certainty. "It's warm in there." She hesitated. The wind blew and made her clothes stick to her skin. She shivered all over. Her body decided before her mind did. She got in. First one bare, dirty foot on the clean carpet, then the other. The leather seat felt warm, like the car had kept the day's heat. The air inside was soft and warm, with a gentle, clean smell that almost made her dizzy because it was so different from the alley. She sat on the edge, like she was scared to touch too much. Her shoulders still hunched, her back tense, eyes always on the door, always ready to run. He got in after her. He sat on the other side, but not far, close enough to cover, to hold, to act fast if he had to. The baby was still pressed to his chest, inside his coat. With the door shut, the street sound suddenly felt far away. The outside world became muffled. Inside there was only breathing, warm leather, warm air. The woman noticed she was shaking less. Still shaking, yes, but it wasn't that wild panic anymore. It was just her body coming out of shock. She lifted her hand to her own arm, like she was checking she was still alive. He watched that and felt something he hated feeling. Guilt, thick, heavy guilt squeezing inside him. He looked at the baby, the tiny hand still gripping his shirt. The baby's skin already looked less icy. He spoke like it was a promise and an order at the same time. His deep voice filled the space and left no doubt. "No one will ever touch you again." She slowly turned her face to him. Her eyes still had fear in them, and anger too, a confused anger with nowhere to put it. She looked at his suit, his watch, the way he breathed like he owned the air. Then she looked at the baby, quiet on his chest. Her throat moved like she swallowed back a cry she didn't want to let out. Her voice came out small, almost a whisper, like saying it hurt. "I don't know who you are." The words hung in the air, simple, raw. He felt like someone had pulled the ground out from under him, because it wasn't an act. It wasn't stubbornness. She wasn't making a scene. She really didn't know. He looked deep into those eyes, empty of memory, and he understood, truly, with a painful, clear feeling. She had lost her memory, and that certainty fell on him like a weight. His chest rose and fell in a slower breath, trying to hold back what was coming up inside him. Because he could buy a building. He could move people around. He could silence the press. He could run the world, but he couldn't run her mind. And there on that warm leather seat, with the baby holding on to him and the woman looking at him like he was a stranger, he realized, without having the courage to say it out loud, that saving them was not enough. He would have to win her again, from the start. His own wife. The car started moving. Inside, the warm air slowly turned into a cocoon. The noise from the street faded away, but the silence between the two of them, that silence was heavy. He held the baby as if he had been born to do it, even though he didn't really know how. His arm was steady, his chest rising and falling slowly, trying to pass calm into that tiny little body. Inside, his mind was racing, crashing into the walls. Too many things at once. How did I let this happen? He didn't say it out loud. He just swallowed it down. She sat on the other side. Her eyes went from the baby to him, from him to the door and back again. There was no rest in her gaze. The car took one turn, then another. Lights flashed past the window, quick, like cuts. The baby made a small sound and settled against his chest. The tiny hand opened and closed, looking for something steady. He felt a tight twist in his stomach when he realized the baby was reaching for him as if it already knew. He placed his palm on the baby's back, a short, careful stroke. She saw the gesture and, for 1 second, her anger wavered. Just for 1 second. Then it came back, hard. The car stopped. It was a gentle stop, no jolt, as if even parking was done so it wouldn't bother anyone. The door opened. The cold from outside tried to come in, but the warm air from the entrance pushed it back straight away. Outside there was a covered area, well lit. This wasn't just any place, it was big. It was quiet. It was the kind of place where the world seems to ask permission to be there. A man outside held the door, standing straight, in dark clothes, with a serious face but startled when he looked at her. And 2 more security guards appeared, but with a different kind of respect now. No one spoke loudly, no one pushed. He got out first, still holding the baby. She hesitated. Her body didn't want to get out. It was like her body knew that once she stepped out, there was no going back to street life. And that was frightening, because the unknown for someone who has suffered a lot also feels like a threat. He didn't pull her, he didn't touch her. He just waited a second and spoke quietly, not looking like an owner. "Come on. It's warm inside." She took a deep breath and got out. Her foot touched the ground and she pulled a face. She was barefoot. The concrete there was cleaner, but it was still cold. She tugged the edge of her clothes down to cover her feet, as if that would help. He went ahead, making space, and the guards stayed behind, not touching her. The main door opened, and the shock hit her in the face. Light. So much more light than she had seen in, she didn't even know how long. A huge hall with white marble floors shining. So shiny it looked wet, but it was just too clean. The sound of footsteps changed in that place. It echoed. Everything echoed. A massive chandelier hung up high, with lots of little lights like stars trapped on the ceiling. There was no dust, no mess, nothing out of place. Silence. A silence that felt expensive. She walked in slowly, and her first step left a mark. A dark streak on the white marble. She looked down straight away. Like she'd been slapped, her dirty, wet foot leaving a trail. She tried to pull her foot back out of instinct, but it was already there. And shame rose to her face, hot, even though her body was cold. She walked smaller, trying to step only in certain spots, but it was impossible. Every step said, "I don't belong here." He saw it. Inside, it hit him like a punch of guilt. Because the house was his. The silence was his. The marble was his. And still, she looked like a stranger being judged by the floor. He didn't say anything. He didn't look at the marks like they were a problem. He just carried on, steady, like he had decided that if her world dirtied the marble, then the marble could just deal with it. They went through wide corridors, pale walls, huge paintings, the smell of cleaning. The smell of his aftershave was still in the air, now mixed with the smell of a warm house. She was shaking less, but it wasn't relief. It was just her body starting to feel the change in temperature. He took her up to a more private area, a big warm bedroom with softer light, thick curtains, a huge bed, an armchair, a bathroom that looked like a hotel. He went in first and carefully placed the baby in an improvised cot made from blankets on top of the bed, something he had told someone to prepare. Everything was too fast, like the whole house obeyed him without him needing to speak. She stood still at the door holding the box. I'm not going to... She started, but she froze. She didn't know what to say. She only knew she was tired and scared. He nodded towards the bathroom, not forcing her. "Have a shower. Hot. You can go." She frowned, suspicious. He added, without changing his tone, "No one's going to come in. The door locks from the inside." She stared at him, trying to find a lie, trying to find a trap, but her body was shaking and her lips were cracked. Her skin looked like it was begging for help, so she went. She stepped into the bathroom like someone entering a holy place and a dangerous place at the same time. She looked at the glass shower, the white towels folded up, the bottles lined up, the warm floor. She turned on the water. Steam rose quickly. The sound of the water hitting the shower floor was almost comforting. She put her hand under it, and the hot water made her sigh without meaning to, a sigh that slipped out like her body remembered what it feels like to not hurt. She took her clothes off slowly. Each piece felt heavy, stuck, dirty. When the water really touched her, she shut her eyes tight. The water ran down her face, her neck, her thin shoulders, and took away a layer of dirt that felt stuck to her skin for years. The water on the floor turned dark at once, brown, almost black. She looked down and went still for a second. That color running down, it was like watching the alley disappear. The dirt going down the drain, like a piece of the past was being ripped off and swallowed by the floor without asking. She rubbed her arms with trembling hands. She scrubbed hard, like she wanted to wipe away invisible marks. And while she scrubbed, a lot of things came up that she didn't understand. A tight feeling in her chest. And a tight feeling in her chest. A bad feeling with no name. An old fear with no face. Like her mind had locked drawers and someone was banging on them from inside. She breathed deeply, trying to push it away. The baby cried outside, a short little cry, and she went cold. Instinct pulled her back to the real world. She finished quickly, grabbed a huge towel and wrapped herself up. The soft cloth against her skin felt almost strange. She couldn't even remember what that felt like. She came out of the bathroom slowly, her hair dripping, her face cleaner, but her eyes were still on alert. And then she saw. He wasn't sitting in a chair, he wasn't on the bed. He wasn't standing up giving orders to people. He was on the floor, sitting on the bedroom floor, leaning against the side of the bed, his back against the wood, his legs bent any old way, like he didn't care about posture in there. And the baby was in his arms, fitting neatly in the crook of his arm, like it was the most natural thing in the world. He rocked gently, almost too small to notice, just enough for the baby to feel movement and not get scared. The baby was calmer, eyes closed, mouth slightly open, a warm little breath coming out. She stopped straight away. The scene didn't match the man she had seen in the alley, the man in the suit, the power, the voice that gives orders. Here he looked human, tired, tense, but human. She clutched the towel tighter around her body. Her throat went up and down, and her suspicion came back hard because she didn't know how to trust anything good. She spoke, sharp, looking straight at him. "Are you trying to buy us?" He lifted his eyes slowly. His look was steady, but there was something broken deep down, something he didn't hide very well. He didn't laugh. He didn't make a joke. He didn't get angry. He just answered simply, like it was the only truth he could say at that moment. "I'm protecting you." She let out a breath through her nose, not believing it. "Protecting? Why?" He didn't answer that part. Not yet. He looked at the baby for a second, adjusted it better in his arms, and then nodded towards a small table near the window. There was a tray of food there, hot, smelling good. Rice, meat, bread, soup, and a glass of water. She looked at it like it was a dangerous dream. Her stomach even tightened, remembering what hunger is. He spoke quietly, firm in the same way. "Change your clothes and eat." She didn't move. He carried on, no pressure, but not leaving space for a long argument. "Eat. Then you rest." He took a deep breath like it was hard. "And then, I'll tell you everything I know." She stood there, her hair dripping onto the expensive carpet, her eyes fixed on him. The way he held the baby was too safe to be just an act, but she still didn't believe him. Not even a little. She stood still for a few more seconds, staring at the food as if she was not allowed to touch it. The smell rose up, warm, plain, straight to the point. Her stomach made a quiet sound, giving her away and hurting her pride. He did not insist again. He just stayed there, sitting on the floor with the baby in his arms as if that was where he belonged. The silence felt heavy, but it was not the alley's silence anymore. It was a different kind, a silence full of things that were not said. She saw the clothes on the bed, picked them up and quickly went back to the bathroom again to get changed. She found it strange how the clothes were exactly her size. She came out and slowly went over to the tray. She sat on the edge of the chair, her damp hair running down her back. She picked up the fork with a shaking hand. She looked at him one last time, as if she expected him to laugh, to mock her, to do anything cruel. He did nothing. He just lowered his eyes to the baby and adjusted the cloth carefully. She took the first forkful to her mouth, Her body reacted at once. Her eyes closed without meaning to. The hot food going down was almost painful because it felt so good. At first she chewed slowly, as if she did not trust that it was real. Then hunger won. She ate faster, not desperate, but steady. Each spoonful seemed to bring a bit of color back to her face. He watched from the side in silence. The baby made a tiny sound and kicked his little legs. Without thinking, he lifted his arm a bit to support him. It was not a planned move. It was automatic. When she finished, her body seemed to switch off completely. The food sat heavy on her shoulders. The warmth of the room, the bath, the silence, all of it together. She blinked more slowly. She tried to keep her eyes open. She failed. "I'm not going to," she mumbled, but the sentence died before she could finish it. She sat on the edge of the bed, still wary, as if she was ready to get up at any moment. But her tiredness was stronger than her distrust. She lay down on top of the bedspread, not covering herself properly, like someone who is only closing their eyes for 1 second, and she passed out. It was not light sleep. It was a drop. Her body sank into the mattress as if she was falling into a deep hole of exhaustion. He stayed still for a few seconds, listening to her breathing, short at first, then slower, heavier. He stood up slowly, careful not to wake the baby. He put the little one in the makeshift cot on the bed. He adjusted the blanket with a firm but gentle move. He watched for a moment, checking he was all right. Then he left the room in silence. Minutes later, he came back, without the suit. The tie was gone. His shirt was open at the first button. His sleeves were rolled up to his forearms. His hair, once perfect, now had one strand out of place. He looked less like a businessman, more like a man. He walked in and saw she was still sleeping deeply. She did not even move. Her face was relaxed, but there were still marks of tension in her eyebrows, like even in sleep she was ready to fight. The baby was awake, eyes open, quiet, staring at the ceiling as if he was studying this new world. He came closer slowly, as if he was afraid of getting it wrong. He picked the baby up. This time there was no audience, no security guards, no her heavy stare, just him and that small being, breathing warm against his skin. "Hey," he murmured, his voice lower than normal. The baby moved his mouth and made a short sound. He looked around, a bit lost. Right, nappy. He had never done that, never needed to, never thought he would need to, but now it felt like the most urgent thing in the world. He put the baby carefully on the bed, near him, away from the edge. He grabbed the bag he had asked the guards for, with basic things. He opened it like someone opening a safe full of mystery. Nappies, wipes, cream, formula, dummy, little clothes. He took a deep breath. Come on then, clumsy. He loosened the cloth wrapped around the baby and tried to take off the old nappy. The baby kicked his little legs, nearly hitting his hand. He pulled back, a bit startled. "Easy, easy. I'm learning," he murmured, almost like he was asking. The baby made a sound that was like a tiny laugh, or maybe it was just air. He cleaned him carefully, like each touch could break something, fully focused. His tongue lightly caught between his teeth. He put the new nappy on crooked the first time. He had to fix it. He took a deep breath again, tried one more time. This time it was right. He let out the breath he had been holding. The baby moved his arms and suddenly grabbed his finger, tight, small, but strong. That little hand closed around his finger as if it had chosen it. He went still. The touch was warm, alive. He felt a squeeze travel up his arm to his chest. The baby opened his eyes and stared at him. And there, in that silence, he felt something that did not have a nice name. It was raw instinct. It was blood recognizing blood. He pulled the baby closer to his chest, and when the blanket slipped a little, he saw it. A small scar on the baby's collarbone. Small, almost nothing, but the same as his, in the same place, on the same side. He knew that mark. He had it on his own body since he was a child, a thin scar from an old fall. He stared at it for a few seconds that felt far too long. The world felt small again. He swallowed hard. His throat scratched. "My heir," he said softly, almost a whisper. It was not pride. It was recognition. It was certainty. And with that certainty came the weight. How did I let this happen? The picture of the alley came back in his head. The wet cardboard, the cold, the crying, his son, his woman, on the street, while he had marble and chandeliers. Guilt rose like a knot in his throat. He closed his eyes for a second, holding the baby to his chest, feeling the small heart beating. "I should have found you earlier," he murmured, more to himself than to anyone. His voice came out heavy. It was not crying, it was something harder, anger at himself. The baby squeezed his finger again, and in that exact moment, a small movement on the bed, the sound of a sheet being pulled. She had moved, and the word was still hanging in the air. Heir. She opened her eyes slowly, still half stuck in a heavy sleep. For a second, she did not know where she was. The high ceiling, the dim light, the clean smell, it all felt far too strange. Then she saw him holding the baby, and the baby was quiet, holding onto his finger. Her body reacted before her mind did. She sat up with a jolt. Her heart thumped hard. "What did you say?" Her voice came out rough, sleepy, but sharp. He froze. His eyes went to her, a second of silence, like he was weighing every word, scared to ruin everything. "Nothing," he tried, but the lie came out weak. He was not good at lying when he was like this. She got up, swaying a bit. She was still weak. Her hair was dry and a mess. Her face was clean, but there were deep, dark rings under her eyes. She looked at the baby, and her eyes softened for a moment. Then they went hard again when they went back to him. "So you're saying," she pointed at the baby with her chin not getting close, "that he is yours?" He did not answer right away. He just took a deep breath. His chest rose and fell slowly, trying to hold back the storm inside him. "I need to talk to you," he said quietly. She did not trust him, but she also did not have the strength to fight right then. He stood up carefully, put the baby in the cot slowly, like he was made of glass. He fixed the blanket. The baby pulled a small face, but did not cry. He made a simple gesture to her. "Come," she followed with light steps, like if she made any noise someone would attack. The house was far too silent. The corridor felt endless. The light came from small lamps, making everything look warm, but the silence still felt scary. They reached a big room. It was not a normal sitting room, it was too lovely, too big. A light-colored sofa, a clean coffee table, the smell of wood and coffee, an unlit fireplace, heavy curtains, and on the wall, photos, lots of them. She stopped at the doorway. Her body went stiff. Her eyes ran over the frames like they were knives pointed at her, and she saw herself, her all done up, her smiling, her in a white dress, her with flowers in her hand, her hugging him, his hand on her waist, her looking at him in a way that should have meant something, but it did not. She felt empty, a cold, strange emptiness. Because it was her face, her body, her life, and still it looked like a photo of someone else. She took one step, then another, getting closer. Her fingers touched the edge of a frame. The glass was cold. In the photo, she was smiling, a wide smile, a trusting smile. She looked at the face in the photo and then at her own chest, waiting to feel something. Warmth, pain, a memory, nothing. Just a tight feeling with no name, like she had lost something and did not even know what it was. "Who is she?" she asked, pointing at herself in the photo, and it came out so strange it hurt him too. He closed his eyes for a second. The guilt hit him hard again. "It's you." She gave a short laugh with no humor, and the laugh turned into a sigh. "It doesn't look like me." He pulled out a chair and showed her to sit down. She did not sit straight away. She stayed standing, like sitting would mean letting her guard down. He started in the simplest way he could, in a deep voice. No drama. He even sounded tired. "You must have had an accident." She blinked, trying to understand. "An accident with what?" He ran a hand over his face like the tiredness was stuck to his skin. "They told me a car hit yours on the way back from an event. I went there. I only found your car and you were gone. After that, I never saw you again." The word "gone" went into her like a needle. She frowned. "I was gone. You disappeared," he said more quietly. "I looked for you everywhere." She looked at him like she was checking if it was true. He carried on, more direct. "I found the car wrecked. Blood, glass." His voice slipped for a moment. "But you weren't there." She felt a sharp pain in her head. At first it was just discomfort, like pressure behind her eyes. She put a hand to her forehead. "Stop," she murmured. Not to him, but to her own body. He saw it. "Does it hurt?" She did not answer. The pain grew fast like a wave. Her body went tense. She screwed her eyes shut. And then the flash came. It was not a full memory. It was like a torn bit of film, moving far too fast. Bright light, people talking, the sound of a phone taking photos, and then him hugging another woman, her arm around him, the other woman far too close. His face smiling. The image was so clear it made her stomach turn. She opened her eyes in shock, breathing hard. "You cheated on me," she shouted. Her voice hit the walls and came back loud and sharp. He did not move. He did not raise his voice. He just stood there like he had been waiting for this for a long time. She stepped forward, shaking, her hands closing into fists. "I saw it. I saw you." She pointed at him in anger, like that photo was right there in the room, hanging in the air. I was pregnant." Her voice broke halfway, but she carried on, forcing the words out. "And you smiling at her, like it was nothing." She put a hand on her own belly, by instinct, like her body remembered first. The headache came back hard, pounding. He took a deep breath. He did not deny it. That was what scared her most. He only closed his eyes for a second, like the weight was too much, and when he opened them, his voice came out low, steady, controlled. That was set up. She went still. Her anger got confused. She blinked, trying to understand, her chest rising and falling fast. "Set up?" she repeated, like the word was in another language. "Set up by who?" His jaw tightened. The muscles in his face went hard. He walked to a drawer in a side table, not rushing, but with a tension you could feel. He opened it, moved through old papers, like someone looking for a wound. He pulled out a yellowed envelope, old, with worn edges. And on the envelope, written by hand in firm writing, was a name, his business partner's name. He held the envelope for a second, like it burned. Then he looked at her. "By someone who wanted to keep you away from me." She shook, not from cold, not from shock, because it was not just cheating. It was something else, something dirtier. She took a slow step towards him, her eyes locked on the envelope, like that paper had power. Her voice came out low, almost a whisper, but full of fear and anger mixed together. "Why?" He slowly rubbed his hand over his face, like he was trying to wake up from a nightmare that had gone on for far too long. The envelope was still in his hand. His fingers squeezed the paper hard, crumpling the edge a bit. He did not have everything. He did not have every bit of proof sorted out, every detail neatly tied up, but he had pieces, and he had guilt. "Because he wanted everything," he replied, his voice low and heavy. She did not look away. He carried on, walking slowly around the room, as if each step helped him put his memories in order. "He was my business partner." He paused for a moment. "I called him my brother. Even you used to say me and him were like brothers, that it was nice to see." The word brother came out bitter. "We started together, from nothing. We grew together. We shared the risk. We shared the wins. I trusted him more than I trusted a lot of people in my own family." He stopped near the cold fireplace. The reflection of a fire that was not lit seemed to match how he felt. But when the company really started to grow, when it became an empire, he took a deep breath. He started wanting more than his share. She listened in silence. Her arms were crossed, but her body was less hostile now. Her headache was still there, a dull throb, but she forced herself to focus. "I started noticing things that were wrong," he said. "Money going missing, strange contracts, transfers that did not add up." He looked at the envelope in his hand. "I was looking into it quietly, alone, because I still wanted to believe it was a mistake." He let out a short laugh with no humor. "It wasn't." She swallowed hard. "And what has that got to do with me?" He turned his face to her. His eyes looked tired but steady. "You were the only thing he couldn't control." She frowned. He explained slowly, like each word was heavy. "For him to take everything, he needed to weaken me. He needed to throw me off balance. He needed me to mess up." He moved a little closer. "And he knew you were my weak spot." The air in the room felt heavy. She stayed still. He went on. "To do that, he needed to wreck our marriage." The words landed hard. "He needed you to pull away, to leave, for me to be alone, with no family." She put her hand on her belly without even noticing. He carried on, looking straight into her eyes now. "The woman in the photos." He took a deep breath. "She was his wife. You know her." She blinked, confused. "What?" "They paid photographers." His voice went hard. "They chose angles. They cut out what they didn't want. They made it look like something it never was." He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "He set up that meeting saying he needed to talk about the finances, said it was urgent. So I went." He clenched his fist. "And when I got there, she was already there. The memory seemed to dirty the air. She sat too close, spoke too loudly, kept touching me. And before I even understood what was going on, there were people taking photos from far away." He looked at her straight. "I left angry. I thought it was just a blackmail attempt. I didn't go and tell you any of it, all that mess, because I was scared you'd get upset and stressed." He paused. "But I didn't know the photos were going to reach you like that." She was breathing faster now. "I think I got them on my phone," she murmured, almost to herself. "Anonymous. Just the pictures." "It's hard to remember, it's all a blur, but I got really worked up." Her eyes went distant for a moment, trying to fit the pieces together. He nodded slowly. "He knew you were pregnant." The silence turned heavy again. "He knew that if you saw that, you'd leave." His voice dropped lower. "Because you've always been too proud to accept cheating." She felt it like a hit. "So you knew he was doing dodgy things," she said, her voice shaking. "And you still didn't tell me?" He closed his eyes for a second. "There was the mistake. I tried to sort it out on my own. It came out like a confession. I wanted to protect you from the scandal. I didn't want your name dragged through the papers. I didn't want you pulled into an investigation, into a dirty headline." He opened his eyes again. "I thought I could handle it." His jaw went tight. "I thought I could fix everything before it reached you." He took a step closer. "It was a mistake." The word came out plain. No pretty excuse. "I wanted to protect you." His voice went rougher. "And I lost you." She stood still. Her eyes were shiny now, but it was not easy crying. It was pain being held in. She whispered like she was talking to the floor, "I ran to protect my son." He felt it go straight through his chest. She lifted her gaze, steady, even though she was trembling. "I thought you had chosen another woman." Her voice broke. "I thought my son wouldn't have a place in your life." She raised her hand to her face, squeezing her eyes shut for a second. "I was scared. Scared you'd take him from me. Scared to raise him somewhere I would just be the one who got cheated on." The word came out bitter. He did not move. They were both right and wrong at the same time. He chose silence for a few seconds, a silence full of regret. The distant sound of the baby in the other room made a soft noise, almost like a sigh. It reminded them both what was at stake. He looked again at the envelope in his hand. "I still don't have everything," he admitted. "I've got part of the proof. I've got money movements, fraud. I've got records of payments to the photographers." He lifted the envelope a little. "But I don't have the last piece. The one that proves he planned to push you out of my life on purpose." She took a deep breath. "So you're not completely sure?" He did not look away. "I'm sure what he's capable of." He went quiet for a moment, like he was making a decision right then. His look changed. It was not just guilt anymore. It was determination. He put the envelope down on the table carefully. "I'm going to find the final proof." His voice was firm, controlled. "I'm not leaving this half done. He made me miss my child's birth. He made you end up out on the street. I'm going all the way, and I'll make him pay." And the air in the room seemed to grow thicker. Because now it was not just about the past. It was about facing someone who had planned to destroy everything. The house went quiet after that talk. Proper quiet. No more arguing, no raised voices, just the weight of what had been said. She went back to the bedroom without really looking at him. She walked down the corridor like someone in a place that isn't theirs. Every picture on the wall felt like it was watching. Every step on the marble sounded far too loud. He stayed in the living room for a few minutes, standing still, looking at the envelope on the table. His mind was spinning. Anger, guilt, fear of losing again. When he went back to the bedroom, she was feeding the baby. He respected her space and left. About an hour later, he came back. She was lying down again. But this time, her sleep wasn't deep. It was restless. She kept turning from one side to the other, like she was fighting pictures in her head. The baby slept calmly in the cot. He stood near the door, watching them both. The scene looked right, but the air was still full of doubt. The early hours came slowly. The house got even quieter. No staff footsteps. No car noise. Just the soft sound of the air moving and now and then the baby's sleepy sigh. She opened her eyes in the dark. It wasn't fright. It was a decision. She lay there for a few seconds, staring at the ceiling she could barely see. Her chest rose and fell slowly, but her eyes were far too awake. She turned her face towards the cot. She saw the baby there, small, calm, protected by a blanket that was far too clean for what she was used to. She got up slowly, making no noise, bare feet touching the cold floor of the room, her dressing gown brushing lightly behind her. She picked the baby up carefully. He grumbled softly but didn't fully wake up. She looked at the door, then at the corridor. Her heart was pounding, not because she was scared of him, but because that place was too big, too rich, too strange. "This world isn't mine." The words were born inside her before they became sound. She left the bedroom. The corridor felt even bigger in the early hours. The weak lights threw shadows on the walls. The silence seemed to listen to every step she took. She went down the stairs carefully, holding the baby close to her chest. The banister was cold in her hand, The air felt cooler downstairs. She reached the front door. The door was tall, heavy, impressive. She stood there for a few seconds. "This world isn't mine," she whispered, now in a low voice, almost like she was begging herself. She held the handle. "And it never was. But you are." His voice came from behind her, deep, calm, no shouting, no threat. She closed her eyes for a second before turning. He was standing on the last step of the stairs. No suit, no tie, just a dark shirt with the sleeves rolled up. His hair was still messy from broken sleep. He wasn't angry, but he was far too awake. She held the baby tighter to her chest. "I don't belong to this," she said, looking at the huge hall, the marble, the expensive silence. "I don't know how to live here." He came down the steps slowly, not fast, not pushing in. "You belong wherever you choose," he replied. "You're my wife and I love you more than anything in my life." She felt the words hit in a different way, not like ownership, like a painful truth. She shook her head. "I don't remember loving you." The words came out plain. No shouting, no drama, just truth. And that was worse than any accusation. He stopped a few steps away from her. His breathing failed for a second. She saw it. She saw the hit land. His face didn't change much. He had always had control, but his eyes went darker, like something had broken inside. She carried on because she needed to finish. "I don't remember trusting you. I don't remember our wedding. I don't remember anything that makes me stay." She swallowed hard. "And I can't live in a house that doesn't make sense to me." He stayed silent. His hand clenched into a fist for a moment, then opened again. He was fighting the urge to beg, fighting the urge to hold her by force. But he didn't do it. He came down the last step, stopped in front of her. The door was still slightly open. The cold, early morning air came through the gap and touched her face. He looked at the door, then at her. And he said with a calm that looked like it cost him a lot, "If you go on, I won't stop you, but I will help you remember. We'll get help. I'll help you remember our first kiss, our plans, our dreams, the things you like, your favorite foods." She looked surprised. He went on, his voice lower now. "I've already messed up by trying to decide for you." He took a deep breath. "I won't do that again." She felt something strange in her chest. It wasn't a memory. It was a feeling. He took one step closer, but kept a respectful distance. "But my gut tells me you still feel it." She frowned. "Gut feeling isn't memory." "No," he agreed, "but sometimes it's stronger." He put his hand in his trouser pocket. He took out something small, silver. He opened his hand slowly. It was a bracelet, the same as hers, not broken anymore. The silver was clean, polished, shining under the weak light in the hall. She recognized it before she even touched it. Her fingers shook. He held his hand out. "I kept this," he said, "even when you disappeared, and I never stopped wearing this ring. Not for a second." The gold wedding ring in his hand. She looked at the bracelet and the ring, as if they were dangerous things, as if touching them could open a door she didn't know if she wanted to open. The baby moved in her arms, making a small sound. The silence grew thick between them. He kept his hand held out, no pressure, no demand, just offering. She hesitated. Her eyes went from the shine of the silver to his hand, from his face to the baby in her arms. The baby was asleep, warm, heavy, trusting without knowing. She didn't take it. Not yet. But she also didn't leave that early morning. Her hand came close, stopped, then went back like some invisible force was pulling it away. He understood. He swallowed his own wish to hear "stay." He put the bracelet back in his pocket without making a fuss, like someone putting away something fragile so it won't break even more, and he stepped to the side, making room. The door stayed there, half open. He didn't lock it. He didn't signal the security guards. He didn't order anything. He just let the choice hang in the cold, early morning air. She stood there for a few more seconds, shaking not from the cold, but from confusion. Then she slowly turned back, going up the stairs with the baby without speaking, like her body had chosen, even if her mind was still saying no. Morning came, slow. The house woke up little by little. The smell of coffee rose. The sound of quiet footsteps from well-trained staff, all respecting her space. None of them could try to make her remember them, so they wouldn't overwhelm her. The baby cried once and then stopped, held close with a blanket. She stayed in the bedroom almost the whole time, staring out of the window like she was waiting for someone to appear out of nowhere. He didn't push for a talk. He just left food nearby, left water, left silence. Until in the middle of the afternoon, the sound of the television spilled into the corridor. It wasn't loud. It was just the house being alive somewhere. He was in a smaller room, like an office with armchairs. There was a big TV on the wall. The news was on. She appeared in the doorway with the baby in her arms and stood there quiet, watching. He had his phone in his hand, like he was waiting for something. His face was tight. His jaw was set. She took 2 steps. "What is it?" she asked softly, wary. "You've been like this since this morning." He didn't answer right away. The TV changed picture. A well-dressed man appeared, perfect smile, neat hair, a party background, microphones, flashes, those cameras on him like he was a hero. His body went even stiffer. The man on the screen was the business partner. His voice on the TV was far too calm, far too polished. "We're worried about the company's stability," he said, looking at the cameras with a responsible face. "In recent months, our CEO has been making emotional decisions." She frowned, confused. The partner went on in the same tone. "There is serious information about a woman." He paused, small and careful, like someone dripping poison slowly. "A woman who lived on the streets. An unstable woman who could put a child at risk." She felt her blood turn cold. The baby moved in her arms and she held him tighter. On the screen, the man carried on, still smiling. "We want to make sure that if, by some madness, his heir is his, then the child grows up in a safe place, with people who are ready, with responsibility." The word heir came out of his mouth like it was property, like he could decide. She looked at the man beside her, trying to understand how big this was. "Is he talking about me?" Her voice came out low, but it was already shaking. He took a deep breath, holding back his anger. "He is." The TV showed blurry pictures, like someone had filmed in secret. A woman from behind, messy hair, getting into a black car. The image was bad, but the point was clear. Expose, humiliate. The reporter's voice came in. "According to close sources, the woman may have psychological problems after an accident. And the CEO is personally involved." She felt the floor disappear for a second. Her hands started to sweat. Her heart thumped hard and fast. A strange heat rose in her chest, like she couldn't get enough air. "No," she whispered, staring at the screen like she could wipe it away with her eyes. The partner appeared again, now holding a paper, lifting it slightly like he was showing proof without showing anything. "We are taking legal steps," he said, "temporary steps, to protect the child and the company." He said temporary, with a smile that looked like it would last forever. She took a step back. The baby almost woke up, feeling her body shake. "Legal steps?" she repeated with hardly any voice. He grabbed the remote and paused the picture. On the screen for a second you could see a document, and in the bottom corner you could see a signature. His signature. The partner's name written clearly, firm like a stamp, and at the top highlighted, "Request for temporary guardianship." She didn't understand the word at first, but she understood what it meant, because her body understood. Her body always understands first. She panicked. The air felt short. Her sight felt like it was closing in. "This is stupid," she said loudly, her voice breaking. "He doesn't even have any link to me or to this child. What legal steps without tests, without checks?" She pointed at the TV, shaking. "How is he going to take my son? How?" The baby woke up and started to grumble, feeling the fear. She rocked him without noticing, trying to calm him, but her hands were shaking too much. "He can't," she kept saying, like the word can't was a shield. "He can't, and I can see you're already starting to remember a few things. It was because you were an energetic woman with strong opinions that I fell in love." He stood up at once, fast, but he still didn't touch her. He stayed close enough to protect her, far enough not to scare her. "He's trying," he said hard, "and he knows how to use paperwork." She looked at him, eyes wide, full of pure fear. "So he really can?" Her voice became a thin thread. "He can just come and take him?" He drew in a breath, trying to choose the simplest, truest words. "He can try to convince a judge," he said. "He can try to make you look dangerous." She shook her head quickly, almost losing it. "I'm not dangerous. I was just trying to survive." He nodded, steady. "I know, and he will never manage it. I wouldn't let it happen, not for any reason in the world. He just wants to ruin my name." She pressed the baby to her chest, like her body could hide the little one inside her again. Then his phone buzzed on the table. An alert. He picked it up, read it, and his face hardened completely, like night had come back in the middle of the day. She saw his look and her panic rose even more. "What is it?" she asked, out of breath. He looked at her. His voice came out low, firm, plain. "He's got something else up his sleeve. They've booked a hearing." The word landed heavy, like a hammer, and the silence after that wasn't peaceful silence. Peaceful. It was the silence of war on the way. The court day arrived under a grey, heavy sky, like the whole world was holding its breath. The black car stopped in front of the huge building, full of glass and stone. Everything was cold. Everything was serious. Everything looked like the kind of decision that changes a life. As soon as the door opened, the sound came first. Click, click, click. Cameras, flashes. A harsh white light bursting in her face, one after another, with no break. People talking at the same time. Voices over each other. Questions thrown like stones. Is it true she lived on the streets? Is she unstable? Is the baby really his? Are you going to lose the company? She held the baby tight inside her coat. The baby had a little hat on, but she still protected him like the wind could hurt him. Her body was stiff. She had had a shower, she had clean, smart clothes, her hair tied back, makeup on, perfume, but inside she was still the same woman from the alley, alert, ready to bite if anyone got near her child. He got out of the car right behind her. Tall, steady, a hard look, not anger, war. He put himself in front of her without even thinking, an instinct like a shield. Enough, he said quietly, not shouting, and still the crowd took half a step back. Security opened a path. Inside the court building, the air was different. It did not smell of luxury, it smelled of paper, old wood, and cold coffee. It had the silence of people waiting for a judgment. They went in, and the first thing she saw was him, the business partner, sitting on the other side, in a perfect suit, hair neat, the posture of someone who thinks he has already won. He spoke with lawyers and smiled slightly, like it was all just a show set up to humiliate. When he saw her, his smile turned colder, a smile that never reached his eyes. Her stomach turned. The baby moved in her arms, and she held him tighter. Don't touch. Don't look. Don't even breathe near him. That was what her body was screaming. They sat down. She felt the eyes on her, judging, weighing her up, measuring. She tried to keep her face steady, but her hands gave her away. They shook a little, even as she held the baby. The hearing began. The judge's voice, papers being opened, lawyers talking like it was all simple. The partner's lawyer stood up first. He spoke nicely, calmly, with words that sounded clean, but had dirt inside them. Your Honor, we are here to protect a child and a company. He looked at her like she was the problem. This woman appeared out of nowhere after months missing. There are records that she lived on the streets. There are reports of emotional instability. Her skin burned. The partner stared ahead with that saint-like face. Then he asked to speak. He stood up slowly, like he enjoyed being watched. And then he spoke straight with the right tone, practiced, looking at her now and then to cut her inside. She is an opportunist. The word hit the room like a slap. She held her breath. The baby let out a short little cry, feeling the tension. She rocked him gently, trying to calm him, but her eyes did not leave the man. The partner carried on, voice steady. She is taking advantage of my partner's weak moment to get close to a possible heir. He paused, as if he was being very responsible by saying it. Our child cannot grow up in the hands of someone unstable. She almost stood up, almost screamed, but her instinct spoke louder than her anger. Protect first, react later. She held the baby tighter, pressing the baby's face into her chest, and inside her, something woke up. An ugly strength, rough, old. She had already survived the cold. She had already faced people kicking boxes. She had already slept hungry. Shame was not going to take her child away, not there, not now. She lifted her gaze. Her eyes went hard, full of fire, and he noticed. The partner noticed and liked it, because he wanted her to lose control. He wanted a scene. He wanted a reason. He made a small gesture to his lawyer. The lawyer opened a file, and the whole room grew tenser. The lawyer said, "We have proof of her behavior and the reason for her disappearance." He pulled out sheets, photos, old photos. She felt the shock before she even recognized the image. Her body froze. Her head hurt at once, like her memory was trying to force its way back. The photos were held up, turned towards the judge. One image, him hugging another woman. The perfect angle, the perfect distance, the perfect smile. The partner tilted his head, pleased, like he was saying, "See?" Her blood went cold. The room felt smaller, and the sound of the press cameras outside felt like it had come back into her head. The baby moved in her arms, and on the other side, he, the man beside her, stood up, all at once. The chair scraped the floor with a sharp sound. Everyone looked. He did not speak loudly, but when he started, his voice filled the whole place. Enough, he looked at the judge, and then, without giving fear permission, he started putting the truth on the table. I have proof that goes against all of this. Bank records. His lawyer was on his feet too, opening a thick, heavy folder packed with documents. He handed it to the judge with steady movements. Payments made to his wife and sent on to a photographer. He pointed his chin at the partner, barely even looking. The same week these photos showed up, and the woman in the photo is his wife as well. The partner lost his smile for a second, just one. But he lost it. He carried on without stopping. I have messages that prove it all. The lawyer handed over printouts, chats, times, short, cold words, arranging a meeting, arranging the photographer, arranging the angle. The room went quiet. The partner tried to keep his face calm, but a vein in his neck started to jump. He took a deep breath, trying to hold himself together. But then came the final blow. I have more proof of forged contracts, stolen money, and about this cheating story he brought up. I have video. The lawyer placed a USB stick on the judge's table. The judge signaled. A screen was switched on in court. The security video appeared. A high camera view, no glamour, no cuts, no pretty angle. It showed the place of the so-called meeting. It showed him arriving, speaking to someone. It showed the woman getting too close. It showed the photographer hiding. And it showed the simple truth: there was no intimacy. It was just a staged shot. The lawyer asked to pause it, and the screen froze on a frame, a clear frame. The woman close, yes, but him leaning away, his hand far from her, his face serious with no affection at all. No kiss, no real touch, no cheating, just a trap. The court fell silent. The judge looked at the video, then the papers, then the partner. The partner swallowed hard. His mouth opened, but no words came at first. His lawyer tried to move, tried to speak, but the judge raised a hand, cutting him off. "Are you telling me this was forged?" the judge asked, looking straight at the partner. The partner tried to smile. He could not. His face started to lose color. He tried to speak. "Your Honor, this could be what?" The judge's voice got harder. The partner sweated, and in that moment, the setup fell apart. Not with shouting, with the truth crushing it slowly. The papers were there, the messages were there, the video was there, and the request for temporary custody now looked like what it was: a dirty attack. The judge made a serious face, wrote something down, and looked at him, the man beside her. "The request for temporary custody is denied." Her legs went weak. But it was not full relief, it was just one piece of air. The judge went on, looking at the partner with disapproval. "And there will be an investigation into the conduct shown here." The partner stood still. The cold smile was dead. Now his face was just held back rage. He gripped his folder hard, like he wanted to break something with his hands. She looked at the baby, who was quiet again, and felt something warm in her chest. It was not memory, it was protection. They left the court under the same grey rain as at the start, but now the crowd was bigger. More cameras, more flashes, more shouting. Did he win? Will she keep the baby? Will the partner be arrested? Is he really the father? He did not run. He did not hide. He walked steady, like that street belonged to him too. And halfway down the court steps, he stopped. He turned to face the cameras. He took the baby into his arms. The baby, as if he felt the focus, opened his eyes and grabbed his tie with his tiny hand, held tight, pulled. A simple gesture, but it seemed to say, "Mine." He held the baby firmly, not taking the little hand off his tie. And he spoke loud enough for everyone to hear without shaking. "This is my son. He was almost taken from me by bad people who took advantage of a father and a mother." The cameras went mad. He carried on, leaving no room for doubt. "My heir." He glanced to the side at her, and his voice became even firmer, more human. "My family." No contract, no test in that moment, just instinct, just blood recognizing blood. She stood beside him, with empty hands for the first time in a long time, like she did not know what to do with her own freedom. And then a breeze brought his smell to her, the woody scent, the same one that cut through the stink of the alley, the same one that now, there in the middle of the flashes and the rain, seemed to sink in too deep. She blinked. A sharp pain went through her head, and something, deep down, moved. The sharp pain came like a needle behind her eyes. She stood still on the court steps, with cameras bursting all around her, but inside everything went strange, like someone had turned the world's volume down. His smell was in the air, that woody aftershave, warm, dry, far too familiar. She blinked once, then again. Her throat tightened. His face holding the baby, saying, "My son, my family." It all felt far away, like she was watching from the outside. She closed her eyes for a second, and that's when the flash hit. It wasn't a nice picture. It was a cut. It was a shock. An office. Yellow late afternoon light coming through the window, the sound of rain tapping on the glass, her sitting on a chair, him standing in front of her, no suit, shirt collar open, face tired, and his voice, the same deep voice, only full of hidden fear. I love you so much. I'd do anything for you. I don't know how a human being can love someone this much. I was born to live this love. She opened her eyes on the court steps with her heart racing. The memory had felt too real. She put a hand to her forehead, like she could hold her head in place. He looked at her straight away. Hey, his voice came low, protective. Are you all right? She didn't answer, because the memory was still coming in pieces, like someone had thrown the memories on the floor, and now they were trying to fit back together on their own. She remembered that sentence. She remembered his eyes. But in her head, that memory always came mixed in with those photos, mixed in with the feeling of betrayal, like her brain had stuck the wrong things in the right place, and that left her lost. He signaled to the security team, and they cleared a path, guarding the exit. They got into the car fast, not giving anyone the chance to ask more questions. Inside the car, the noise from outside became muffled. The baby was still in his arms, gripping his tie like he didn't want to let go. He gave a small smile without noticing, and adjusted the baby carefully. She stayed on the other side, silent. His scent was there too, caught in his shirt in the leather seat in the air. She breathed in deeper without meaning to, and another sharp pain came. A warmth rising up her chest, a feeling of, I know this. The car drove through the streets, and little by little the city fell behind. When they reached the mansion, the huge silence of the house swallowed everything. She went in slowly, her head still pounding. The baby was already sleepy. The day had been heavy even for him. He took the baby to the bedroom, with that calm, steady way of someone who, without even noticing, was already becoming a real father. He put him in the cot, fixed the blanket, and watched for a second like that was the center of the world. She stood in the doorway, watching. And there, in that clean hallway with the low light and his scent in the air, her memory started pulling harder. Like the house, the sound, the warmth, were keys. They went to a smaller room, more private, no press, no flashes, just the two of them. The fireplace was lit now, low, making a soft sound as the wood burned. The heat touched her legs, her face. The air smelt of coffee and his aftershave. Always him. He stood for a while like he didn't know where to put his own body. Then he sat on the sofa, a bit away, giving her space. She faced him, but she didn't sit. She was scared that if she sat down, she would fall apart. He spoke first. I saw you close your eyes out there. His voice was steady, but careful. Did you remember something? She pressed her fingers together, trying to hold back the shaking. I saw an office, she said softly. I saw you talking to me. He went still. His jaw tightened, like hearing it hurt and helped at the same time. She swallowed hard. I remembered that, she went on. But in my head, it came with those photos. It always came together. Like it was all the same thing. He took a deep breath, long and heavy, full of guilt. Because he wanted that, he said. She lifted her eyes. Who? Even though she knew, he didn't look away. My business partner. He leaned forwards a bit, elbows on his knees. The posture of someone about to say something you can't take back. I told you part of it, he said, but I didn't tell you everything. Because I was ashamed. And because, he swallowed, because I thought if I told you everything, you'd get even more scared. She stood there listening. The fire cracked as a bit of wood split, and the sound seemed to mark every sentence. He spoke calmly, like he was opening a wound with his own hands. He wasn't just taking a little, he said. He was taking millions, quietly. He'd been doing it for a long time. Her eyes widened. He nodded, bitter. I found out. I started collecting proof, and when he realized I was getting close and he decided to hit me where I was weakest, he looked at her. You. Things I can't prove enough to say in a court, but he threatened your life, your reputation. She felt a shiver. He planned the photos, planned the message, planned you getting it in the cruelest way possible. His voice got harder. Because he knew you would leave. She tried to speak, but nothing came out. He carried on, lower, and it wasn't just to push you away. He rubbed his face. It was to use you. She froze. Use me? How? He breathed in deep, and when he spoke, his voice was even heavier. As a hostage. The word landed like a stone. She felt her stomach turn. He explained, simple, with no fuss. When you vanished from my life, he could find you, he said. He could hide you. He could threaten you. He could pressure me. Her hand rose to her mouth without her noticing. He went on. And with the baby, with the heir. He glanced down the hall, like the word had weight. He could destroy me for good. Her breathing went short. So, you, she tried. He cut in, guilt spilling out in his voice. I tried to protect you by keeping my distance. He lifted his eyes, and this time it was raw truth. I thought if I stepped back, he'd lose interest. He'd look for another way. He swallowed. I thought I could control it. He shook his head like he hated himself. I chose to protect you in silence. The words hung in the air, warm and sad. He carried on even quieter. And I paid for it by losing you. Her face crumpled, not from memory yet, from pain, because somehow, even without all her memories, she felt how lonely that choice had been. She felt his fear. She felt the weight of a man who thought he could save everything on his own, and failed. Her eyes filled with water. She tried to hold it back, but the tears came, hot, straight, out of control, and with the tears, the memory started coming back more whole, like the truth was making space inside her. She closed her eyes again, and the flash came back, but now with more sound, more detail, the same office, the same rain on the glass. But now she remembered the way he held her face with both hands. She remembered his voice shaking a little when he said, "It's dangerous." She remembered her saying, "I don't want to be far away." She remembered him saying, "Trust me." And she remembered the fear, not fear of cheating, fear of losing. She opened her eyes, crying. She looked at him like she was really seeing him for the first time. Her voice came out broken but clear. "You didn't cheat on me." He stayed still, like he needed to hear it again, to believe it. She shook her head, crying more. I was tricked," she whispered. "I was pushed away." He swallowed. His eyes were shining too now, but he held it in like he always had. She took one slow step, then another. Her body was shaking, but not from fear. She reached the sofa. He lifted a little, like he was going to come closer, but he stopped. He waited. He let her choose. She raised her hand. Her hand paused in the air for a second, unsure, like she was still scared it wasn't real, and then her fingers touched his face, softly, like she was checking he was there. Her thumb moved over his cheek, slowly, and he closed his eyes at her touch, like that was the safest thing he had felt in years. 2 years later, the city down below was still noisy, rushed, full of lights and car horns. But up there, in that penthouse, everything felt calmer, warmer, like the world had been left outside. The living room was big, lit by a soft yellow light. It wasn't that cold luxury light, it was home light, life light. The rug was soft, huge, pale, and it had toys scattered around with no shame at all. A little car, a doll, a cloth book, a small ball that hit the wall and came back. And in the middle of it all he was running, the baby. He was a little boy with quick, wobbly steps, strong little legs, messy hair, and an easy smile. He ran over the rug like the rug was the whole world. He ran and laughed loud, the kind of laugh that fills the home and makes everything feel possible. "Careful," she said, but her voice had laughter in it. She couldn't even pretend to be cross. The boy just looked over his shoulder, laughed more, and kept running. He came after him, but not like a businessman, not like a shark. He came like a dad, barefoot too, plain t-shirt, hair a bit out of place. "Hey," he said in his deep voice, but joking. "Come here, little one." The boy swerved at the last second, clever, and almost slipped. Both adults held their breath at the same time. "Son," she took a quick step. He was even quicker. He scooped the boy up before he fell. He lifted him like it was nothing, but his heart had raced. You could see it in the way he held the little one tight to his chest for a second longer than he needed to. The boy laughed, not even noticing the scare. And then, with that tiny hand, he tugged at his dad's collar and kissed his cheek with a wet, sudden kiss. No fuss, no warning. He closed his eyes and smiled, a real smile. But right after that, his hand went to the woman's arm. He held it, like he needed to make sure she was there too, always there. She noticed, and she didn't say anything. She just rested her hand on his, calm, like she was saying, "I'm here." Near the window on a low table, there was a glass box. Pretty, simple, clear. Inside it, an object too small to carry so much weight, the little wool bootie. That same one, the one that once hung from her finger, dirty, wet, nearly ruined. Now it was clean, kept safe, folded with care, like it was jewelry. It wasn't decoration. It was a memory. It was a warning. It was never again. The boy ran again, slipping out of his arms, and went straight to the hallway, heading for the big bathroom where the jacuzzi was. Bath, bath, he sang in his own way, wrong and sweet, clapping his hands. She laughed and went after him. "You've got far too much energy," she said, grabbing a towel. He came right behind them, holding the boy by the waist so he wouldn't fall. "He takes after you," he said with a half smile. "Stubborn. He takes after you," she shot back, looking sideways, and they both laughed. A light laugh from people who have been through things that were far too heavy, and now they value the simple stuff. The bathroom was big and warm. Steam was already rising. The jacuzzi water was warm, with small bubbles popping on the surface. The boy got excited, pulling off his own t-shirt with a bit of help, throwing it on the floor without even looking. Me, he said, pointing at the water. She crouched down, kissed his forehead, and took off the rest of his clothes slowly. "Easy, champ." He, standing to the side, tested the water with his hand. He turned the hot, turned the cold, the way he'd learned, the way it now felt natural. They put the boy into the water together. He held him from underneath first. She held the little one's hands, and the boy let out a happy squeal when the warm water wrapped around his body. "Ah!" he laughed loudly. She started washing his hair with children's shampoo, white foam making a hat on his head. "Look at you, you look like an ice cream," she said. The boy laughed and tried to grab his own foam. He took a little blob of foam too and rubbed it on the boy's nose. "There you go. Now you've turned into a—" he thought for a second. "A bear." The boy howled with laughter, smacking the water with his hands and splashing. Water flew up and hit her in the face. She pulled an over-the-top shocked face. "Hey!" she complained, laughing. He laughed properly, that rare laugh of his chest loosening. The boy splashed more, happy, and both adults ended up wet. For a moment it felt like the past didn't exist, but it did, and it lived in the details, in the way he watched the door, like he still expected someone to walk in and ruin everything. In the way he, without noticing, held her hand tight when the boy moved too much. In the way that, when she laughed, he looked at her like he couldn't believe he still got to have this. She noticed when he pulled the boy closer to his chest, and at the same time pulled her in too with his arm, like the two of them were the same thing. He held her like he could lose her, like that night in the alley could happen again. She looked at him. She looked calmly. No anger. No rush. She waited for the boy to get distracted by a toy in the water. Then she moved closer. "Hey," she said, very softly. He turned his face, confused. "What is it?" She took a deep breath. Her voice came out steady but gentle. "You didn't have to save me from the world." He went still. She carried on slowly, looking him in the eyes. "You just had to trust me." He swallowed hard. The guilt still lived there, even after a year. A guilt he carried quietly, like that was how he paid. He lowered his eyes for a second, then looked up again. "My instinct has always been you," he said simply. Always. His hand squeezed hers lightly, like a promise said again. "But I learned," his voice got lower, "I learned that protection without truth hurts." She felt her chest tighten, because that was it. He wanted to protect her, but he kept quiet, and the silence became a weapon in someone else's hands. The boy let out a little shout of joy, slapping the water, and they both looked at him at the same time. Their heir, there, whole, safe, laughing. And that laugh seemed to say fate didn't break. It just waited. She ran her hand through the boy's hair and then looked at him again, the man who had changed inside. And all of a sudden, an image shot through her mind like lightning. A cardboard box on the ground, rain, cold, crying, and a man who could have just walked past. He could have gone into the building, ignored it, told someone to clean it up like he always did, and never seen her face, never heard that cry, never felt the weight of his own child against his chest. She felt a shiver, even in the warm bathroom, and the thought came like a question that wouldn't leave her alone. What if he had walked straight past that box? She lifted her hand slowly, carefully, like she did that night when the memory came back, and she held his face, her palm on his face, firm. A simple touch, but full of everything. He closed his eyes at her touch like he still needed that proof. "And now that you've got this far, and tell me honestly, would you have run away in her place? Or would you have faced it all by his side? Does love deserve a second chance, even after so much pain?" Leave a comment. And if this story touched you, subscribe, because the next one